18 million pieces of chocolate roll off production lines every day at this factory in Illinois.
How many times a day do you get to try chocolate?
Sometimes it's multiple times a day, yeah.
You have to, right? Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Behind these popular American brands is an Italian company, Ferrero.
When I tell people I'm from Ferrero, the first thing that they always say 100% of the time is, "Oh, Ferrero, they make the little golden balls." I said, yes, we do. We also make Nutella and Tic Tac and Crunch and Baby Ruth and Halo Top ice cream and Blue Bunny ice cream.
Ferrero has been on a shopping spree, snapping up American favorites and pouring money into new factories, all to grab a bigger bite of the $55 billion confectionery market in the US that's very different from Europe.
US tends to prefer milk a little bit more than dark chocolate. Americans love peanut in a way that Europe in particular doesn't really.
Trends like that are forcing Ferrero to take risks. The company launched an entirely new flavor of Nutella just for North America for the first time in more than 60 years. It has also invested in a US-based candy lab, betting big on innovation.
I want to say that is salted caramel and that's marshmallow.
We're actually starting with the individuals that have worked at those Michelin star restaurants to develop our ideas and to eventually bring them onto our factory lines.
So we went to the heartland of American manufacturing to find out what foreign brands like Ferrero are doing to get an edge, and why the US is the biggest candy market in the world. Ferrero has quietly been building a chocolate and snacks empire in the US. But currently, it's the third largest confectionery business in the world, behind Mars and Mondelez International. So how can it catch up with the competition?
I think Ferrero takes a very different approach, which is buy well-established, loved brands, and then turn them back around.
In fact, this factory in Franklin Park, Illinois, belonged to Nestle. But in 2018, Ferrero bought its US confectionery business for $2.8 billion.
Okay, so we've got a lot of stuff to put on before we can head in there. There are earplugs because it's loud, goggles, I assume for splatter, hard hat, and steel-toed boots in my size. Okay, so after like 10 minutes of putting on things, I'm all suited up, head to toe, and ready to go in.
And even though everything we were wearing was brand new, we had to walk through sanitizing stations several times, and it's not as easy as it looks.
Yes, I made it.
You know, you didn't hold the handrail. It's all right. It's okay.
I failed.
Today, the folks who run the show here are Italians, like Robert Poe, who was born and raised in Alba, where Ferrero is based.
Like, does the whole town just work at Ferrero?
Yeah, practically. There's about 35,000 people in Alba and probably about 5,000 work for the company, so you can imagine.
But in here, Ferrero is still producing American classics, like Baby Ruth, made here since the 1960s.
Well, the best advantage for us to have a plant in the US is to be here, and the size of the consumers here is a very attractive point. So I believe in the US we will expand more than anywhere else in the world.
That's become Ferrero's playbook in America. Don't erase what people love. Instead, help it grow.
So we're now going to head into Fannie Mae, which is a premium American chocolate brand that's 106 years old. And Ferrero bought it in 2017 and was their first American acquisition.
For generations, Midwestern families have come here for holiday gifts and boxes of chocolate.
We're really American pralines built around the American palate. And you look at our Pixie, it's still the same recipe that we made in 1946 we make today.
So far we've seen a lot of the chocolates that you can find at a grocery store, but this is a more premium selection that I can put together myself. I love dark chocolate. Can you help me pick a few?
The brand's value went beyond the numbers. It was more a symbol of Ferrero's growing commitment to this country.
When Ferrero purchased us, I think we had way more products. I think we got really focused on the right products. You know, we innovated against the right things. They also offered us a chance to get even beyond Chicago.
Since then, Ferrero has added many household names like Famous Amos, Little Brownie Bakers, and Keebler. And last year, the group snagged W.K. Kellogg's for $3.1 billion, bringing in cereals like Fruit Loops and Frosted Flakes.
They're sweet, they're crunchy, they're great!
And we have spent over $5 billion in the last 5 years on investments within the U.S. So we are investing heavily in U.S. manufacturing.
With more than 50 brands, including luxury chocolates, candy, mints, cookies, and breakfast cereals, the third-generation business is still growing. It's nearly doubled its revenue since 2018. Today, the company's president, Giovanni Ferrero, is the second richest man in Italy. And those closest to him told us that it's become a personal mission to crack the US market.
Mr. Ferrero comes to the United States frequently. He will literally bring hundreds of innovations to the US every year. Say, try this, what do you think? Gather input here, gather input from consumers.
But for Ferrero, manufacturing in America has been tricky.
At the national level, again, there's a lot of push and excitement when we say we're going to invest in the US. So I think that part has gotten a little bit easier. The parts that have gotten tougher, I would say that it's more expensive to bring equipment in, for example. It's a little bit of a challenging regulatory and tariff environment.
Let me put it this way. So some of the equipment was very obsolete. We brought a lot of equipment from Italy, from Germany. We have spent a lot of money to improve also the structure of the place.
Buying beloved brands and upgrading their factories is just one growth strategy. Ferrero is also trying to decode American taste buds by investing in a 45,000 square foot innovation lab in downtown Chicago. Effie Nestrud led us through this restricted area.
Is it open to the public?
It absolutely is not.
So this is top secret. I love it.
It's extremely top secret.
I was always one of the kids that would play with my food, and eventually I just kind of started to understand that you could do that for a living, that someone would actually pay you money.
Here, she oversees a team of 8, including pastry chefs.
Been working with chocolate my whole career, and it just never ceases to not interest me, to not capture my imagination.
At any given time, they're working on more than 100 products, tinkering with textures, flavors, and ingredients.
I would say something that is really critical in a role like this is to just make sure that you don't close off any ideas, that you always make sure that you'll at least taste everything, generally at least twice.
They even put our taste buds to work. We were handed 3 unlabeled samples of Butterfinger coating and challenged to guess each flavor.
If you try it, close your eyes and just try it, and it takes you back to a memory, a childhood memory.
French toast.
Perfect.
Okay.
Check.
That one was easy. I want to say that is salted caramel and that's marshmallow. I can be a tester or taster, whatever.
Yes.
Through experiments like these, they've identified trends, some more obvious than others.
American consumers love sweet things. A lot of times we will get comments of, I love it, but there's something off. And sometimes if you adjust the sweetness, it's exactly what they wanted.
1, 2, 3, and then gently. Yes, perfect. Oh my God, you can work with me.
Americans are also big on nostalgia, something Ferrero is now tapping into.
In chocolate especially, what you were exposed to when you were young tends to carry forward to when you're mature, as far as those products come.
So again, you might eat French toast every weekend with your family at home, and then you go into your local grocery store and you find a Butterfinger French toast.
Still, one of their biggest bestsellers in the US isn't American, but a Ferrero original, Nutella. In fact, it was their very first product. It all started in 1946 in a small town in Italy called Alba. Back then, the country was reeling from the devastation of World War II. Cocoa was scarce and chocolate was expensive to make. So 2 brothers, Pietro and Giovanni Ferrero, turned to an ingredient that grew in abundance, hazelnuts. They mixed them with sugar and the little coca they could find to create a solid sliceable loaf called gianduio. They wrapped it in foil and sold it around town where people would slice it onto bread. That post-war recipe kept evolving until in 1964, Ferrero launched the first jar of Nutella.
Nutella Ferrero.
These days, it makes 365,000 tons a year, equal to the weight of the Empire State Building. But now, it's trying to localize that taste for US consumers with its latest creation, Nutella Peanut. About 90% of US households have peanut butter in their pantries, so Ferrero decided to make this its first new flavor since 1964. It took the company about 5 years to get the recipe just right, and it invested $75 million to build the new Nutella Peanut line.
And right now we're running, as I mentioned before, 300 jars a minute, so you can see how fast that goes.
Does it ever jam up?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
And then how long does it take you to fix it?
Usually I would say a minute. So it depends a little bit, but usually it's really fast.
Since January, they've already produced more than 7.5 million jars of Nutella Peanut. To avoid any supply chain disruptions, Ferrero buys the peanuts from the US, mostly from Georgia. They're also used in other products like Baby Ruth and Butterfinger.
Really crunchy and crispy at this stage.
Yeah.
Amazing. Can I have more?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks.
In fact, this factory processes roughly 24 tons every day. That's about the weight of 6 African elephants. Ferrero also uses about a quarter of the world's hazelnuts in some of its signature products. Most of that supply used to come from Turkey, the world's largest producer. But in 2019, reports surfaced that some of those farms used child labor. Ferrero told us since then it's improved traceability throughout its supply chain, while also diversifying its sourcing.
I would say a lot of our nuts are grown in the US, especially in Oregon, where we send most of our nuts then to our Nutella facilities and our Rocher facilities.
Since 2020, Ferrero says it has tripled its use of American ingredients, including raisins from California. And the bulk of its eggs, milk, and sugar supplies also come from American farms. Sourcing locally not only helps Ferrero avoid supply chain disruptions, it's also betting that the Made in America label will appeal to shoppers. But not every ingredient can be found here.
Clearly, the U.S. can't grow chocolate. We don't have, you need to be in a rainforest climate, so our chocolate still comes from outside.
Ferrero's cocoa beans mainly come from West Africa and end up in Bloomington, and we decided to head there.
So we're an hour into this drive and just seeing a lot of wind turbines and silos and farmland so far.
Bloomington has historically been a college town, but since 2018, manufacturing jobs have increased 150%, with investments from electric vehicle companies and of course Ferrero, which brought jobs to the area.
Ferrero's chocolate factory here is enormous.
The middle 6 silos right here are for cocoa liquor. Each one holds about 45,000 kgs of cocoa liquor. On the very end, the 4 silos, 2 of them are for dark chocolate.
At any given time, this place stores upwards of 720,000 kilograms of chocolate. That's as much as 8 fully loaded Boeing 737 passenger jets.
We were not able to see how that chocolate is made. That is obviously a top secret, but all we saw were these massive tanks and it smells like chocolate in here.
This chocolate is also used for Kinder, which has around 30 products worldwide, such as eggs and Bueno bars.
So when you think about from a global powerhouse perspective, Kinder should be, eventually, in the US, the #1 chocolate brand.
So Ferrero decided to start producing Bueno bars locally by building its first US factory from the ground up.
Make that growth both economically viable and to have the right type of local market insights, we have to build facilities in the US.
First, the wafers are baked until they're crispy. Then, the signature hazelnut cream is piped inside. We got to try it as soon as it came off the line.
Without the chocolate yet, the hazelnut is really cutting through.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
The bars are then coated with a thin layer of chocolate.
Behind me are the rejects, and I would happily eat even these.
While the basic recipe stays the same, European candy makers often tweak ingredients in the US. Take milk chocolate. In Europe, it needs at least 25% cocoa solids. In the US, just 10% chocolate liquor. That's a mixture of cocoa solids and cocoa butter. Many brands in the US, including Ferrero, also use compound chocolate in some of their everyday candy. It's cheaper because it's made with vegetable fats rather than cocoa butter.
If they're added, then the product no longer meets the standard of identity for chocolate. Sometimes you'll see these labeled as chocolate flavored. And you have to be a bit careful because there are some very high quality coatings that are manufactured. So just because it isn't real chocolate doesn't necessarily mean that it's an inferior product.
Europe has also long banned several preservatives and artificial colors that were still allowed in American candy.
President Trump and I are going to stop the mass poisoning of American children.
Now, as Washington pushes companies to clean up ingredient lists, Ferrero says, as a European company, it's already ahead of the curve.
We obviously will follow any regulation that's mandated by the government, but I would say relative to many of our competition, the impact of the Make America Healthy Again regulatory pushes is less severe on the Ferrero portfolio.
Once the bars are ready, they are wrapped, packed, and boxed up, mainly by machines. But chocolate factories haven't always looked like this.
Historically, confectionery, chocolate and confectionery manufacturing has involved a lot of handwork. So there were large numbers of people involved. And nowadays, a lot of that's been replaced with automation, robotics, especially in packaging.
We will also still need the individuals to be more skilled in operating the machines.
And that's why they haven't stopped hiring, growing from 300 employees a decade ago to more than 5,000, a trend that's increasingly rare in the US.
While President Trump has promised more manufacturing jobs in the United States, they're actually declining and they're shifting from high labor-intensive jobs to more mechanized ones like the ones we see here.
But by continuing to hire locally, Ferrero is turning Made in America from a label into a business strategy. So is Ferrero's bet on North America paying off? Well, this region now makes up about 15% of the company's portfolio, compared to just 4% about a decade ago. Since 2017, U.S. revenue has grown from about $600 million to roughly $3 billion, faster than its main competitors.
We are today at Ferrero where Coke and Pepsi were in the 1920s, which is starting to introduce to everybody in the economy to become a ubiquitous, omnipresent powerhouse.
Winning over America is one thing. Staying ahead is another. And the next big breakthrough may come from a growing wave of craft chocolate makers, those transforming cacao from bean to bar.
Early in my career, there maybe were what we call 6 primary bean processors that take raw cocoa beans and process them into chocolate. And now in North America, there are something like 350. The advantage of these small manufacturers is that they can be very innovative. And I think even the large companies are looking to these smaller companies for some of those innovative ideas.
But for lifelong employees like Robert, Ferrero's success is about more than sales. It's personal.
All my relatives, my wife, my son, everybody, when they go into a store, they fix the display, they put the jars in the right way, and the Kinder chocolates all aligned. They remove the items that were put there by mistake because this is us.
Any excuse to eat chocolate before noon.